Alright, super readers, are you ready to practice one of your powers today? Let's remind ourselves first what powers we've earned so far this year. Turn and talk to your partners about it. And then the kids would turn and talk to someone next to them for about a minute, and then I would call their attention back and call on volunteers to list the powers we've earned so far. That includes pointing power, reread power, sound power, partner power, picture power, snap word power, persistence power, and partner read power. After we had a chance to go through all of the powers, I would go on and say, we use all of these powers when we read, right? Today, we're going to get some extra practice using our reread power. Why do we reread something? And then call on students, probably about 3 or 4 students depending on time and responses, and then I would guide the responses and say, we reread to help us understand books better, and also to help us read more fluid. We don't want to read like a robot. One way we can read less like a robot is by using our rereading power as we act out books that we've read before. Think about when you watch a movie or a TV show. Do the characters keep a plain face and speak in the same flat tone the whole time? No! How do we know how these characters are feeling? And then I would call on volunteers to discuss how we know how characters are feeling, and then guide responses. We know how these characters feel based on how their voice and their face change, right? When you are reading, you can do the same thing. You can bring your book characters to life by the way you read. Let's practice. If your character was happy, how might you read the sentence, I'm happy? And then we would continue with other emotions, such as, how would you read, I am sad, or I'm angry, or I'm confused. Let me show you what this looks like while reading. This is a book we all know really well, right? There is a bird on your head. Let's see what this would look like. Piggy! Is something on my head? Yes! Alright, now boys and girls, join in with me and help me out with this next page. Piggy says, there is a bird on your head. And Gerald says, there is a bird on my head? We would continue to read through this book, and as I was reading, I would provide feedback to students by saying things like, oh, I like how Emily showed how Piggy was feeling confused by the way she changed the way her face looked, or the way they changed their tone of voice, or the way they changed their body, moved their body. So after going through, there's a bird on your head, and then a big guy took my ball, I would then send the kids off to work in small groups, saying something along the lines of, now I want you to meet with your old favorite groups to act out your books. Each group member will pick one character to act out. If you don't have a character to act out for the first reading, that's okay. You get to be the audience and watch the performance. You'll get to act out in the second time around. During that time, I would then circulate from group to group, providing feedback as needed, guiding students, checking in to see, through a formative assessment, how everyone was doing with it. After that, I would bring all the students back to the carpet. We would have a discussion about, what were some of the ways that they portrayed how their characters were feeling, how they think they did, things like that. I got the idea for this lesson after reading the article, Reading in the Brain, What Early Childhood Educators Need to Know by Nancy Frey and Douglas Fisher. In this article, they mention a study done by LeBerg and Samuels in which they found that the key to improving a reader's comprehension is to get them to reach a level of automaticity. They went on to state that one way to do this is through repetition, but this can be challenging because oftentimes repetition can lead to a rut or boredom. The study mentioned the use of student theater as a way of causing repeated readings and motivating students to engage in the repetition necessary to reach automaticity and therefore improve their comprehension. I found this idea very interesting and wanted to modify readers' theater to improve fluency for young students. Fluency and comprehension are closely related. Bredenkamp states that fluency refers to rapid, efficient, and accurate word recognition skills that permit the reader to comprehend the meaning of the text. He goes on to tell readers that fluency requires practice, and therefore I figured that the use of a modified reader's theater could be a great way to give students time to get this practice. Giving students of this age a script to perform, as was mentioned in the study, didn't seem entirely developmentally appropriate though, since many of these students were still learning basic reading skills, so I chose to use old favorites, which are books that they've had read to them at least 5 times. This would be something that would have to be prepared prior to the lesson, probably about a week before, maybe more, to get the students the necessary repeated exposure to these books. I also chose to make this lesson a teacher-initiated experience, which is defined by Bredenkamp as a learning experience in which teachers take the lead by providing explicit information and modeling or demonstrating a skill as determined by the teacher's goals and direction. Using this approach to the lesson allows me to show the students what it means to read fluently and how to put feeling into your reading. The lesson is structured so that the teacher has several opportunities to observe how students are engaging with the ideas and skills presented, as well as to assess if they are attaining the learning objective. During the guided practice portion of the lesson, the teacher can do a general formative assessment of how the class is doing as a whole, which students are eager to participate and demonstrate fluency and the emotion that the character is showing, and which may be more reluctant or may be struggling with the skill. During independent practice, the teacher has the opportunity to observe students more closely while circulating among the groups. Finally, the exit ticket for this lesson allows the teacher the opportunity to observe, assess, and document how each student did in regards to the learning objective. I chose a fairly simple assessment for this lesson, which is just a table that includes the student's name, the book they chose, whether or not they actually read it, and which way or ways they chose to demonstrate the way the character was feeling, whether that be changing their tone of voice, their facial expression, or through body movements. In future lessons, I would most likely use a numerical scale of some sort for the assessment to better gauge where each student falls on the spectrum of achieving the learning objective and fluency in general.